Hey guys, what's going on? Today we're going to be breaking down a Siege of Boralus 10. Now, something that I haven't really done yet is talk about videos where I pug my entire group. So this is a no comms key. I happened to pretty much wake up, saw that there's an 11 Siege in queue. I was like, screw it, I'll queue for it. And this actually ended up being a really, really good run. So I wanted to talk about it, share my thoughts. And because it's a totally pug run, there's a lot of things that I need to handle myself, or in terms of like pretty much play aggressively in terms of my own cooldown usage, so I can live these pulls. Now, the first pull is pretty spooky. I pop an instant health pot almost immediately off the bat while I'm generating stacks of purified chi. We're going to commit the Celestial Brew nice and early, and then unfortunately this watertight shell ends up going off, which means that we're going to get stunned in about 10 seconds, so I need to prepare for that. So how I do that is I pop Diffuse Magic to make sure I'm mitigating some damage early on, and I'm generating enough to have a decent Celestial Brew when I come out of this. Now, luckily, we did get a Hodge on the Wave Shaper, and we are able to mitigate a lot of that damage. I pretty much committed like Dampen Harm, Diffuse Magic, Black Ox Brew, Celestial Brew, and Health Pot to this first pull. This first pull is very, very scary for the tank, and the next pull isn't very scary for the tank. So how you kind of want to treat these dungeons is commit a lot of your cooldowns in one pack, and then as long as you know the next pack is going to be safe, you won't really need as much. These bombers have been significantly nerfed as well, from basically when they existed in BFA. In BFA, you never wanted to pull any fire bombers. Now, as long as you're not standing in fire on the ground, you're chilling. The big kick is always going to be these water shapers, or wave shapers, sorry. And you want to kick their brackish bolt and their watertight shell. We missed it on the last pack, but I think going forward, I don't think we have another one go off. We're pretty good about having kicks. Now, of course, we are running a priest, which doesn't have access to a kick, so we have to be pretty good about making sure that we're controlling it among the four of us. Priests do bring fear, which is a fine interrupt, but again, it's not a lockout. But we do have 4 melee, so that makes kicks in this dungeon not too crazy. Now, luckily, outside of this, the water shaper as well, or wave shaper, and the mobs later on in the dungeon between second and third boss, honestly, there aren't too many kicks that you have to look out for. And as you can see, this pull went down pretty fine. The only scary point was the Shattering Bellow with the Raider, when he sucked us all in. Pretty fine. This pull is going to be pretty brutal. We're going to double it. There is a couple of different frontals here, so we want to make sure that we are, as a tank, facing them towards this wall. Mostly it's the Enforcer with the Slobber Knocker cast, and we want to make sure we're focusing the Wave Shaper with that Watertight Shell and the Brackish Bolts. Outside of that, the Shattering Bellow cast means you need to stop casting or it'll lock you out, so specifically for the Brewmaster monk, that's Chi Burst. Chi Burst is the only spell that will actually get locked out on while we're trying to cast it. While it is a quick cast, it can be delayed by auto attacks, so generally you want to try to cast that spell when you're either not being autoed while you have Celestial Brew active or when mobs are stunned. All right, and that pull is going to go down nice and cleanly. Luckily, like for this group specifically, playing Sin, Ret, and In-Hand Shaman means you have cooldowns all the time. Now, we are skipping this next area. Shroud came up. I'm going to end up actually using Tiger's Lust here instead of mounting up myself, and we're going to skip the Patrol plus that like right-hand pack. Rogue is very good for this dungeon. If you aren't running a Rogue, you can always you can always just run. Like, you can always use invisibility pots. Now, unfortunately, the Rep Paladin went down there. The Brewmaster has a little bit of a bug right now with their Keg Smash generating threat. I don't know if Blizzard will ever end up fixing it. A couple of ways you can do this is either, I mean, obviously DPS don't do anything, but that's kind of difficult, especially if you're using like any type of healing effect, or if you're trying to generate to actually do your damage, sometimes you'll actually end up failing. So DPS should wait. But if you run Ox Statue with an AoE taunt macro, it generally makes it better. I should have used that here, especially knowing that the gutters have like weird kind of pathing with this dock thing that's up above. So it's kind of my fault for letting the DPS die there. He ended up getting hit by like the Bone Claw mechanic, which is the tank buster. But that's okay. We're going to get a quick res, and we're going to go and continue into the next pack. Black Ox Statue is the way that I have found to help mitigate a lot of that initial damage. You can also use it to actually absorb a lot of auto attacks on pull by placing an Ox Statue in the group. Generally, that burst of damage you'll take will actually be mitigated because the Ox Statue has like almost 5 million health. So you can actually use it as almost like a pre-defensive going into a pack. And then everything will get staggered because mobs have different auto attack speeds. As you can figure out like when to kick and when to use your stun, it actually helped mitigate damage early on pull. I don't think I displayed that well in this dungeon specifically, but it's something that I have been doing generally across the board in all my recent runs. This pack is also pretty chill. You have the iron hook, and then you just run away. As long as it doesn't overlap with like kicks from the brackish bolts from the water, or the wave shaper, this is a very tame pull right before boss. We're going to soak the orbs, and then we're going to go in. Now, this boss is really unique to tank, because you don't actually really tank the boss. You have to tank these cleavers, and their frontals come out fairly sporadically. You want to try to aim them away from the boss. Normally, the strategy back in the day used to just be hold them up against the wall and let everyone else handle the fights. But if you're trying to optimize your damage, you want to try to keep them close. So when there is a damage amp on the boss, whenever he runs over these orbs, you can then make sure you're getting extra cleave, basically. Right after the boss gets stunned is typically when he'll do his like iron hook into Gore Crash, and you want to make sure the cleavers are not on top of the boss and you're also facing the frontals away. So I'm trying to do that here. I'm trying to pick up thread as best I can with the cleaver and the powder shot. The powder shot doesn't matter as much because he's going to just cast Molten Slug at whoever anyways. Boss is stunned, so we are making sure that we are hitting the boss here. And the last bomb is about to go off. I can't remember if we end up just soaking it or if the boss gets dragged over it. I think someone ends up soaking it. Oh, the Paladin ends up using bubble and soaking it. That's a good heads up play by him, especially because we're kiting the boss the wrong way. Right now, I'm really trying to make sure I'm picking up these orbs and not letting them touch the boss. Not that the boss does a lot of damage, but the powder shots do. And now we're going to be getting a second set of our bombardments here. So good heads up play by the priest, but unfortunately it went into the Gore Crash. And so now the boss is going to fixate me. So luckily I was close to like one of the bombs here. We're going to drag it on top. Our priest ended up going down because I didn't notice that this cleaver spawned and ended up, I think, killing our priest, which is, again, not a big deal. We are going to get a battle res. I don't think we needed it here for how low the boss was. Again, this powder shot's kind of just doing his thing. Now, I noticed that the bombs aren't getting soaked super quickly, so I run far and I soak the furthest bomb, as well as aiming the cleavers away from the group so we can focus on getting the boss into this last bomb and finishing it off. Again, powder shots don't matter in terms of threat because they're going to just shoot whoever. So boss goes down. We did use the battle res. Again, I don't think we needed it, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Now for the rest of the dungeon, for the most part, we're going to do one skip later on, but we're just pretty much holding W. Pulling these shredders into the side wave shaper is generally pretty good for cleave. You want to be a little careful at the start of this pull because this curse that gets applied to me makes you take 20% more damage per stack. So right now I'm taking 60% increased damage. So again, I used Stamp and Harm on pull, and we also had GS and Sack all get placed on me. In the moment, I was kind of like laughing. I was like, I don't think I needed that much. But again, there isn't a lot of tank damage on some of these other pulls. So use your mitigation early and aggressively. And generally, this dungeon feels actually pretty good for Brewmaster because every other pack is pretty tame in terms of tank damage. And then you pretty much have all your cooldowns for when you need it. And then you kind of take it slow and you just chill. Big kick here is the commander. Bolstering shout, I believe, just gives them a damage reduction, if I'm not mistaken. Like all the mobs surrounding it. So you want to make sure you kick that or it's going to slow down these pulls. And now you do want to chain the commander, but it's always after the Azerite charge. Because the Azerite charge paired with a raider, as you might see later on in the dungeon, proves to be very problematic. If you get gripped in right when the charge is going off, you'll just basically get vaporized. And right here, I pop both my health pot and my fortifying brew. Because again, these these smaller mobs, they do this like bone claw mechanic. Plus with the curse, it ends up doing a lot of damage to the tank. Because you're taking 60% more damage. If you can have a curse spell in here, great. I don't know if the shaman was running a curse spell. You don't need it. It's nice to have, but just using your mitigation should help that. Once the raider goes down, we're going to do the little bit of RP here. Now, if you're not aware, as soon as you walk onto this dock, which the Paladin is doing now, he's popping Bop. Actually, I wish I knew he was doing this because it could have saved me a lot of trouble. Generally, you want a player to run ahead and stop the bullets from flying. Now, typically, if you don't have a tanky class or if a tank's not doing it, you might have to do it after like 1 or 2 reloads because you have to like run, line of sight until they're done channeling, and then you run up against them again. But with Bop, it's physical damage, so you could just run right to it. And Brewmasters are very quick. So I just popped a Celestial Brew and I just rolled dash, and I was there. But either way, just want to be very careful there. If you saw, a rogue actually popped a cheat death because of that little gauntlet, which you don't want to do on the gauntlet because you shouldn't have to commit something that's avoidable. You shouldn't be cheating on, right? That's okay. Anyways, we're going to be pulling this side wave shaper group, or I guess mob. The other mobs died pretty quickly, so I'm going to try to chain a couple of these curse blades in so we're not like wasting too much time. Now, the Wave Shaper ends up dying well beforehand, so it doesn't even matter. But these curse blades, if you try running with them, sometimes they get stuck on the boat and they'll bug out. And they bug out in two ways. They'll either just reset, which is actually the better option. The second option is that it keeps you in combat permanently for the rest of the dungeon. And you don't want either of those things to happen, because if you need the percent, you need the percent, and you don't want them to reset. And you also don't want to be stuck in combat to the point where your healer can never drink the rest of the key. So I like to just try to kill them before jumping off the boat. The other alternative is you can run through the water with them to give them better pathing. But when you do that, you risk people getting stuck in the water and dying to sharks, which, believe it or not, I've seen. So don't let that happen. Anyways, we're now going to start running with the commander because, again, it's inefficient to just kill one mob at a time until the Azurite charge comes out, and then I'll be chaining into the next group. Now, this next pack is, and you're going to see it here because it went to shit. Not in a bad way like we wiped, but it went to shit in sometimes the powder shot, depending on where they feel like running. And I don't know if it's controlled by like where players are standing, but generally the spotter will eventually run away when it's at low health. And if it runs into the boss, it could pull the boss. And the boss can then wipe you unless you're outranging all of its abilities, which is like 100 yards. So you have to run very, very far to reset the boss. The alternative option is like you can actually just line of sight all of these mobs to get them all stacked up outside of the room. But it just for efficiency's sake, it's not like super great. So there goes a spotter in the upper right hand side. I see that that's happening, so I immediately start booking it. I just start running as far away as I can. I should have been better about the broadside, but that's fine. Just don't be in the middle. Cannoneer will die, but now the boss is stuck there just spamming Fiery Ricochet at our group and spamming Gutshot. So Gutshot went on our shaman, which I think we end up healing through, and then we end up using evasion on the rogue, which doesn't actually keep him alive. But basically we almost died here because this stupid spotter ends up pulling the boss. Now I believe it's based on group positioning. It tries to run away, so if all mobs are positioned on the far side of the boss, it's going to run towards the boss. But again, you could just line of sight the spotter out and it's fine. So they fixed this boss in a recent hotfix update. So luckily you can now see the frontal, and they fixed the spell queuing of the Gutshot mechanic, and it's not going to happen instantly. It's going to happen like after a second in combat. So as long as you're in melee, it shouldn't go off. So I roll in and Keg Smash, and the Keg Smash is very convenient here because it always keeps the slow on the boss, and as long as the boss is slowed, she won't leap away. And as long as I'm in combat or in melee combat with it, Captain Lockwood won't cast Gutshot, which is kind of the punishing "you're not in melee, I'm going to just kill your group now" mechanic. The Gutshot applies like a really nasty, hard-hitting bleed, and with some of the other damage from the Fiery Ricochet, you don't need to actually, like, you don't want that to happen. You don't want Gutshot to go off. And so now the bombardment happens. The bombardment is slow. The first one will drop on the third cast. So you can do basically a two-step move. You drop two of the circles in the same exact spot, and then you sidestep to the right and drop the two more, and then you move out of it. So it's really easy to do. I see a lot of people kind of start running and they stagger all four, and that creates this like problem with spacing. And if you're away from the boss and the boss isn't getting pushed, she'll cast Gutshot, and Gutshot could kill someone. So when you do the Azurite bombardment, ideally in an actual pre-made group, you'd have everyone stack, wait for two, move to the left or right, do two more, and then you're all still in melee. So I'm off healing with Vivify when I can. If I see a player low, I generally try to prioritize other players who can either have solid defensives or who can also off heal, because if I keep them alive and they're off healing, it creates this like chain effect. Or alternatively, heal people, keep the paladin alive who has access to our battle res. And the boss will phase again at 33%. So it's 66 and 33. She'll jump away. I do now have an Ox Statue down for early threat here. So right when the mobs come down, I'm then going to AoE taunt. And that's going to allow me to generate massive amount of threat. And they're not going to like randomly melee or crimson swipe any of the melee in my group. Now, unfortunately, I got hit there by the broadside because I stepped in at the last second. Don't do that. Luckily, I was able to live without using a defensive. I could have easily died there, but thank God I didn't. The Cannoneer, unfortunately, is going to die at the wrong time, but I'm going to pick up this cannon, get out of the swirl, and then shoot it. There we go, and I couldn't find my keybind. And then now Lockwood's basically starting the last phase. In terms of defensives, like I didn't feel like I needed to really do anything here. I did use Dampen on that last cannon shot that I did because I didn't know if I was staying in a swirl, and if I was, I could have easily died. So Dampen harm, because of how large the hit is, it should reduce the damage by 50%, which is pretty big, which will allow you to survive and get the shot off to speed up the boss fight. All right, and that's it. And so now we're going to kind of do the same thing here. Bop just came up for our paladin, so we're going to be able to actually cast Bop on me, and I'll be able to actually, get this done. So he's going to cast Bop right now, and I see that, so now I'm going to run ahead and just trigger it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to continue kind of chaining. Okay, so I'm looking at our time here, and we have like 18-ish minutes remaining, which is plenty of time if you're clean, and because we're going to be skipping another pack. So my idea here is like, let's just hold W and not really worry about anything. We're not going to go crazy big on pulls. There's no need to cause any risk of extra damage. Unfortunately, I do end up actually pulling a little bit extra. By the end of the dungeon, I think we end up at like 102 or 103%, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Now, there is some cool snap tech that I didn't feature in this dungeon that I'll probably do a short on, and if I end up doing that, I'll post it on my Discord. So if you want to figure out about or find out about that snap strat, I'll show you guys. It's very effective, I think, in this dungeon, and it allows your group to not have to fight underneath like trees, and it gives you more room to dodge bananas and stuff. Anyways, we didn't need this Demolisher, but I ended up pulling it. It's not a big deal. I didn't realize our route was against this Demolisher. He does big AoE damage with the crushing. It's really important that we don't let him get any of the Xal'atath orbs if they do happen to spawn, because that crush, if he has like 4 or 5 stacks, your group will perish. I'm using Ring of Peace to keep the mobs nice and stacked still while we're running away from the fear. And then the only thing you're really watching out for here is that Tempest. The Tempest casts this thing called Choking Waters, and you're going to see it on the right-hand side of my screen kind of coming up. Kicking that, or if you let it go off, it'll silence whoever it's targeting. And generally it tries to target, from my experience, it tries to target a caster. And the only caster in our group is our healer. And with the AoE damage that's going on, with some other like kind of tertiary effects, things like the slime as well as the water bolts, it could end up killing your group. And you don't want your healer to be silenced for 4 seconds. So ideally, that's the thing that you're going to be kicking. And here comes another pack. Now, I think we're going to get another thing here too, because when these pillagers are low health, I think sub 30 or sub 20, they'll run away, which is obviously not good. And what happens if mobs run away in this dungeon, like the spotter we saw earlier, they end up pulling extra mobs like this Buccaneer. Again, Buccaneer's not too scary. It does a little bit of damage. It spawns these bananas, which could end up overlapping with the fear. If you get stuck in it, you'll die. So try your best not to let any get away. I did end up ringing the second one. I didn't see the first guy run away. But yeah, it's going to be pretty controlled for the rest of the time here. And in terms of defensives in this area, like you don't have to... I actually found the next pack to be scariest. But most of this area is a lot of just physical damage on us. If you're in danger or you want to keep continuing to chain like Dampen Harm and stuff, you can, but I find that Slush Gibber, at least in this 11, ends up being like enough. Our Paladin goes down once again, but we're going to just get a quick res on him before the next pull. He could have easily released here, but again, it's not too bad. Here's me actually checking the route because I'm not used to running with a rogue, so I'm just making sure I have everything. We are going to be doing one more pack, and then we're going to be skipping the spotters with Shroud. So this is me kind of just trolling. I kept stepping on these bananas for fun. I'm not this bad, or at least I'd like to think that I'm not this bad. And we're going to go into this. Now, the cutthroats here are what's going to be dangerous. They're going to apply a really nasty poison effect or disease effect to the tank. Obviously, priests can dispel diseases, but and I can too, but we want to try to prevent them as much as we can. The disease comes out on me, I'm going to dispel myself, and we are also watching out for this Choking Waters. I see the disease goes on my priest. After a few seconds, I'm going to be able to dispel. Actually, the priest dispelled himself, so it ends up being fine. But it's something that you're going to want to think about as a Brewmaster player specifically. If you have a way and you have a global that you can spend to help alleviate the pain on your healer or your group, definitely want to do that, and you can utilize that through things like Detox. So here comes the Shroud. We're going to hug the right-hand side. We're going to be skipping the snipers and the spotter. These mobs are extremely dangerous and very annoying to deal with. And then we're going to be going into this next pull here. All right, so this is where I see I think they might have fixed this overlap here. I think they actually delayed the cast of the Savage Tempest, because what was happening in a lot of earlier runs, especially last week, is that they overlap. The charge and the Tempest would happen at the same exact time, or the grip in, and it would just like kill people. But basically, the very first set, you want to make sure you're spreading as fast as possible, and after that, everything seems to be actually pretty staggered, because the Savage Tempest happens every 20 seconds, but the Azerite charge happens every 15. So eventually it becomes staggered out unless the pull takes a long time, then it actually overlaps again. But basically, right when that first grip in happens, everyone needs to spread. And this, we're going to, again, we're not trying to double this up with anything. We're very fine on time. We have 13 minutes remaining. That's plenty of time to finish the trash and to do both bosses with like 4 to 5 minutes remaining. So we're looking really good right now. The Wave Shaper in this pull is going to be the priority. The invaders apply a nasty poison to the tank. Healers and or anyone in your group wants to dispel this. Luckily, we have at least one dispel for that. The shaman wasn't running poison cleansing totem, which isn't required early on, but it could be useful if you don't have a poison dispel. The paladin could also dispel, but again, I don't know if he's running the talent. But once the Wave Shaper goes down, the next kind of priority would be the commander. It has a lot more health than the other mobs, and it applies a DR if you miss the kick. So right now I'm at 3 stacks, and we're going to be dispelling. So how the poison works exactly is the mobs actually apply a poison to their own weapons, and on successful melee hits, it applies the poison to you. So after a few of those casts, you'll just want to make sure you're dispelling yourself, because at like 3 or 4 stacks, that's kind of the dangerous territory. And so, the upcoming boss is very easy for the tank. The tank shouldn't have to ever worry about Dark Fathom. So I want to make sure I'm using my defensives appropriately on both this pull and the next pull. So I end up dispelling myself again at 4 stacks. The Raider's going to go down along with the sniper, the 2 snipers and the invader. And the next trash pull is probably the most dangerous one in here for the tank. You're going to have double invader, meaning that you're going to get a ton of poison stacks. You have a destroyer, just doing nasty damage. You have kicks you have to watch on both the commander and the Wave Shaper, with the Wave Shaper being the priority. So Bolstering Shout gets kicked by our rogue. Our shaman whiffed the kick there, no biggie. It's hard when you're not in comms with this kind of stuff. I'm going to be actually committing my Dampen Harm to this pull. I have 5 stacks. I need to dispel myself soon. I also committed Weapons of Order. I think I actually end up sitting on these 5 stacks. No, I got the dispel there. Or someone dispelled me. I think it might have been the paladin. I'm trying to look at my tracker. But basically, you do want to make sure you're casting Detox if you can afford the global, because at 5 stacks, the tick of that dot is more healing than any single global will actually end up doing to you. So just watch out for that, and this pull is going to go down. Again, I committed most of my defensive CDs because I know that I'm not going to need it for this boss. This boss essentially just does melee swings. So this boss has been reworked slightly from BFA, if you were a BFA enjoyer. Big changes is the frontal no longer for some reason spawns these brine pools. It's only the break water. So ideally you stay stacked, dodge frontal, and then now there's 2 wave walls instead of 1. I like to place the boss on these corner little tombstone looking shrine things, or I guess there's only 1 here. But basically the reason I like to play corner is because you're going to set your group up in a position where they can quickly move to 2 different points instead of 1. I don't know how to explain that all that much better. But the very first wall set will be easier to not only see, but move to, because you have quick access to 2 spots instead of 1. And then you'll notice that I always like to play far. And what I mean by that is I'm going to never go along the statue, but almost like the edge of the room. And the reason why is I'll show you in a second. Because every second wave set will overlap with a tank frontal. And if the tank frontal is going right at your group, it's going to force your group kind of out of the way. DPS should have the same mindset with breakwater, because it also overlaps with the wave walls every once in a while. So once again, I have the boss on the corner, and that's because now we can move to these 2 areas pretty nicely. So as you can see, I'm going to move to the far side just in case there's a frontal coming out, and then we're going to be moving this way, and you're going to see that the tank frontal maybe comes out here, or maybe it's the next set that it overlaps with. So it's breakwater almost immediately. Our DPS do want to try to stay stacked here, and then we're going to just keep moving and avoiding these pools whenever we can. All right, so there's the frontal, and then I'm going to try to position him on one of these corners after the next breakwater. I see that our priest is a little bit far away, so I'm going to end up trying to Tiger's Lust him, because I do want him to actually be able to get to where we're standing. Or maybe I didn't Tiger's Lust him here. Oh, there we go. These orbs are so buggy, man. Look at this orb. There we go. All right, so Priest did a good job there. Here comes the waves. We want to watch out for this. And then there's a frontal. So that's why I'm not up against the pillar with the rest of my group, because I'm trying to bait that away. And now I can be, because I know breakwaters are going to come up now, but I also know that the frontal already happened. And just like that, we're chilling. We're vibing. Boss is going to go down, and we're going to have like almost 8 minutes to do the last boss. So as long as nothing happens that spells catastrophe, we're going to be pretty good. What's kind of unique too is Brewmasters can actually, or I should say monks in general. I keep saying Brewmasters whenever I'm talking about like generalized talents, but because of our lighter and air capstone in our class tree, we can actually skip a lot of these swirls, and I'm going to show you here in a second. So how you're going to do that is right after the first set, you're going to come up here, you're going to jump, roll, and dash. And what this will do is there's actually like a Z axis. So you can actually just roll and dash right over the swirls and they won't actually hit you. And then one thing to keep in mind here is that we have a full melee group outside of our priest. So we want to actually, we end up splitting our group up. Our shaman is on the far ad, and our rep paladin and our rogue are on the like tank buster, the demolishing tentacle. They did fix this boss that no longer does the knockback on the slam, it just does group damage. So that's kind of convenient. The slam was a little too griefy, where it would like knock you back right when a dispel came out. The healer would dispel while you're on top of each other because you're in the air. So I think removing the knockback definitely made this fight a little bit easier. It also gives all the melee and range just better uptime because they're not getting interrupted in their rotation. Another thing that they fixed is that the orbs are no longer spawning in the water, which is super nice. They'll spawn generally on land, which is good because when the orbs go into this boss, you pretty much just wipe. I'm going to now try to off-heal our shaman. Oh, wait, he's very far. Never mind. You can see my mouse is hovering over his frame, and that's because I'm sitting on this instant Vivify. But if I can't see him, then I can't heal him. Our priest is sitting roughly middle, like right by the cannon, and the rest of our melee are here. So our healer can hit everyone, but I cannot. This guy is eventually going to go down. I'm going to use Touch of Death. You can use Touch of Death on almost every platform if your group's slow enough. But even if your group's fast, you can use it on platform 1 and 3, which I think are the hardest platforms. Platform 1 is hard because of this brick thing that I'm standing on. It creates line of sight issues. And same with the last platform. When you're on the boat, there's also a lot of line of sight issues. But on the second platform, there's almost no line of sight unless you're putting yourself in a really rough spot. So right here, I was actually casting Vivify on our healer. Just to keep him up, I saw that he had the debuff and he decided to dispel someone else. And one other thing to note is that I'm running not Dampen Harm, I'm running Diffuse Magic. Diffuse Magic is very good for this fight, and it's also good for other like instances in this dungeon. But for this fight, I can just dispel myself instantly, and while it doesn't matter as much for the tank, it allows me to mitigate my own damage and just remove the danger of having another dispel out. That could also knock back my melee. I do like to play in the water a little bit here. It is hard to see the swirls, but normally swirls won't target you or target this water like patch that I'm standing in. So you can kind of just chill. And then, yeah, a healer should always on this fight keep track of personals. So right now the shaman has Astral Shift available, for example, but the paladin has bubble, but the rogue has nothing. So if I was the healer in this case, when this next putrid water goes out, I would try to prioritize the rogue. If it goes on him, now he did. He dispelled the rogue first, it went on the shaman, and then he mass dispelled. And we are now just going to hit this terror. Now you can see that the terror is also really low health already, and that's because we have our shaman in the back just wailing on it. We're basically splitting DPS. Now the problem with splitting DPS is that you're going to get more AoE damage because the Demolishing Tentacle does that slam cast. The benefit of splitting it up is when you're in a full melee comp like this, that you run less risk of like the putrid waters cleaving people and killing people. I accidentally rolled down somehow. I didn't know how that happened, but it's fine. And then right there, I almost died. Luckily, I popped Celestial Brew and the freedom came out, but holy cow, rolling down in the water and then jumping through a swirl was not the play. And that's pretty much the fight. This fight's really hard for I would say melee, and I guess casters too, because there's a lot of line of sight spots, though casters can stand up on the stairs and never get targeted by swirls, so it's pretty chill. And also, since they remove the knockback, there's not much danger on this fight anymore. The only thing is that again, this Demolishing Terror does a ton of group damage whenever it does a slam cast. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This last platform seems pretty chill. The benefit of though splitting damage too is that you will get through the platform a little bit quicker, because when that the gripping tentacle dies, you get the bonus of the fact that like the guy gets out of his hand and he repairs the cannon a little bit faster. Now orbs were a little weird there. There's one just like floating. 2 I think went into the boss, but again, now that the Demolishing Terror is dead, there's no slam damage. So the only thing that's dangerous right now is going to be the putrid waters. But again, if you have dispels, double dispel, mass dispel, it's all good. And this mob will go down with we have about 3 minutes left. And what I'll do is I'll jump in the cannon. Generally, you want a tanky DPS to get in the cannon or a DPS with speed. But in this case, with the swirls coming out that last second, I figured it's just better to get the kill shot. And that's it. That's the Siege 11, fully pugged. The route was a little weird because we did have a rogue, so we did some skips. But because the skips are so far apart, you definitely can do it with, like, just invisibility pots. Anyways, my talent build and stuff will be down below. I was running more of a tankier build for this. And let me know if you have any questions. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Huge shout out to my Patreon supporters, because without them, I couldn't do content like this. Hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.